Hi, it's me, and welcome to this overview and guide on how to use the Shi Association identities in Limbus Company. The Limbus Company Shi Association IDs have two things in common across all of them: effects that trigger when below a specific HP threshold, and poise. And that they're oddly slow for some reason. At the time of recording, there are only 3 IDs available in this category: Shi Association South Section 5 Director Don Quixote, Shi Association South Section 5 Heathcliff, and Shi Association South Section 5 Ishmael. And if I had to rank all 3 of them in order from best to worst, I would say it would go Ishmael and then Don. Yeah, Heathcliff doesn't even belong here, to be honest. So let's address the elephant in the room right now, because it's the worst thing about these identities. Requiring low HP is not a good effect in this game. All the 3 of these IDs reach their activation points after their first stagger threshold, which could very easily result in them being killed before being able to use any of those boosted abilities. And in all but one of those cases, the payoff for being on low HP is not very noticeable. Sure do love gaining 2 haste at less than half HP, that sounds great. So let's go over them in order from worst to best to find out how these are really gonna fare in battle. I have to talk about Heathcliff now, don't I? I really don't know whose decision it was to make Heath's HP threshold be 25% instead of 50%, but I mean, just look at his first 2 skills. They don't do anything. To top it all off, even though the rolls are respectable, they're both single coin skills, meaning they have pretty low damage potential to begin with. Gaining an extra 2 power on critical health is not going to make them any better than they already are, provided that you're at high sanity. So yeah, this Heathcliff has one good skill. His skill 3 is an envy/skill with 2 coins that can roll as high as 17 before he gets into his HP threshold, and plus 2 power here actually increases your damage by quite a lot if you manage to have it, since the skill deals 50% more damage by default. But there's a problem, and that's that it is the only skill in the entire game that deals self-inflicted damage. This is meant to be here to help Heath get his HP low to utilize his bonuses, but once you're in that low HP threshold, it's just going to make you die faster. His passive is also pretty useless. For 3 Wrath Resonance, you deal plus 10% damage if you've already taken damage during the turn, and the worst part about this is that his skill 3 does not fulfill that condition. You have to actually be hit by an enemy, and no, I'm not going to get footage of this. The biggest redeeming factor of this identity is its support passive, Self-Neglect. Once again for 3 Wrath Resonance, but this time it increases the damage you deal and take by 20%. When doing well, you already aren't going to be hit, so the downside of this passive isn't as noticeable, and it fits very well in Wrath-focused team comps. He also has an envy counter. It doesn't really matter, but I felt like I need to point it out. When it comes to everybody's favorite gremlin, let's get the bad out of the way first. This identity has very middling speed and a middling support passive. 10% slash damage to your fastest team member while holding 5 Wrath resources negligible at best, especially since slash isn't necessarily the best damage type to begin with. Dawn's big gimmick is being able to build up to very high speeds. Her passive gives her 1 haste for every 3 Wrath skills being used in the turn, which helps her reach that oh so irrelevant 10 speed that her 3rd skill requires, but that's me getting ahead of myself. Both skill 1 and 2 have the interesting quirk of giving her poise on the following turn on hit, which I don't think any other identity has. This is mainly because nothing in her kit gives poise count. While her first skill is average overall, can we talk about how good this skill 2 is really quick? 4 to 16 with 2 coins is exceptionally good for damage and consistency, and it being envy based means it's even better for certain comps. It's also the only skill that requires low HP, and, thankfully, that effect rarely ever matters, since she'll be getting a lot of haste regardless of her HP when you combine her passive and landing hits with this skill. Lastly, her 3rd skill gains 3 power at 10 plus speed. Without that 3 power, it is the 2nd highest rolling skill in the entire game, and the highest rolling positive skill effect that isn't an ego, behind Self-Destructive Purge at a maximum of 25 without its boost. This skill outrolls a good amount of ego in the regular, and it does not need the boost to be a good skill. That being said, it has nothing other than that power boost written on it, so it is solely for damage, which thankfully, a 0.76 growth can support. While not necessarily a selling point, she also has a 3 to 13 evade as her defend, which is the best type of defensive skill, arguably. Ishmael's Shi ID is the only non-base ID in the entire game that everybody will receive before Canto 1, and so you'd expect it to be pretty average, but this is unironically the only one of the Shi IDs that is worth trying to get below half HP with. It's for that sweet +1 extra poise on that first skill, and that skill is pretty respectable for a skill 1 with 2 coins. Okay, jokes aside, this is because of her second skill, which, when below 50% HP, is objectively one of the strongest skills in the entire game. Not only is it her only source of poise count, but it becomes a 5 to 21 roll range with 4 coins. Not only that, but this is the only case of recycling coins where all of them are used in any clashes she participates in, making it the one thing that holds her so highly above the other Shi IDs. It allows her to do very funny things, like soloing the K-Court battle in Refraction Railway number 1. Yep, seems about right. Her third skill is honestly not that impressive. It's another skill that only activates below 25% HP for some reason, and also requires a crit, which means that it isn't as reliable as an effect, and also it heals you equal to the damage you deal, which is kind of the opposite of what you'd want with this ID. It rolls well, but rely on your skill too for your damage in this case. Her passive gives her more poise when you're below 50% HP, which is helpful, if not a little underwhelming. Her support passive, though, completely useless. Like, seriously, who relies that heavily on counter skills? And her counter is, like always, nothing to write home about. For those of you paying attention, you might have noticed that these IDs have one other thing in common. They all generate the exact same sin resources. The combination of Lust, Envy, Wrath is a pretty versatile one and fuels all of these ego perfectly. And all of these that are not wielded by these sinners. So quite a lot of ego, to be honest. The big winners in this case being Heathcliff's Telepole because it's an AoE, and Ardor Blossom Star because it just deals so much damage when it lands. When it comes to building a team around these identities, rule number 1 is going to be to leave Shi Heathcliff as a support, because he doesn't offer anything in real combat. Good identities to pair with the two worthwhile Shi identities in battle are N-Corp Faust and Sinclair, Chef de Cuisine Ryoshu, Blade Lineage Cut Through Otis, I am not biased, you are, and any other ID that also generates Lust, Envy, or Wrath to solidify your team beyond that. N-Corp Sinclair is a powerful team member regardless, and the Gloom generation he adds allows you to use ego like Faust's Fluid Sac and Ishmael's Snag Harpoon. Faust will help in keeping everybody's sanity at good levels, and the added benefit of it being triggered by resonance mean you can control when you activate it, meaning that you don't need to worry about Sinclair not being at low enough sanity. Ryoshu has the same sin generations as the two Shi identities, and does massive damage in her own right, in addition to providing the team with decent healing. For support passives, focus on anything that requires Wrath, Envy, or Lust to activate, as those are going to be the easiest to bring along. The standouts are N-Corp Mersault, who has the same requirements as Shi Heathcliff with 3 Wrath Resonance, and can give your Ishmael a good boost once she's below 50% HP, and Base Rodian, who makes Heads coins deal 30% more damage once you've generated enough Wrath. The best damage-dealing ego in the team I'm showing on screen are Ardor Blossom Star and Corroded Hexnail, which are both relatively easy to fuel in this setup and deal quite a lot of single-target damage to most enemies. Impending Day is also not a bad option, but don't go for kills with it if Ishmael is below 50% HP, because you want her to stay there. You'll want to use Lust Ego the most in order to avoid Ryoshu accidentally healing Ishmael above 50% with kills as well. Remember that when using single-target Ego overclocks, in the case of Hexnail, that if you don't have enough for the stable version, you might still be able to target an enemy, so it might still be worth using. This is really only applicable for Hexnail on this team, due to Faust's superior speed, and the ability to inflict both Pierce and Envy weakness at the same time as debuffing stats for the next 3 turns on the target enemy. And that's about all I have to say about Limbus Company's Shi Association identities. I hope you found this little overview helpful and encourage you to play around with these identities that aren't shit, Cliff. And I'm curious to see what other strategies y'all can come up with involving these IDs, so feel free to comment down below if there's a synergy that you've found or a strategy involving them that works well for you. Also consider liking the video and subscribing as it helps me out a lot. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you back for the next video. Bye bye!